My name is Ayla. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the most iconic and beautiful intros of all time, Voodoo Child's Slight Return by Jimi Hendrix. Just a heads up, I'm tuned down to E flat, just because that's the way Jimi was in the original, and let's jump into it. So first things first, that iconic intro. Be warned, if you're going to be using some overdrive in a wah pedal or fuzz in a wah pedal, it's probably going to be a noisy setup. I'm just going to say right now, this is going to be a noisy video as far as my guitar tone is concerned. Before I even click on the wah pedal, let's talk about what's happening. This is all about your right hand or your strumming hand at the very beginning, because you're taking your fretting hand, lying it across the string somewhere near the 7th and 9th fret area. Doesn't have to be anything specific. And when you do that, if you strike the strings, you hear that it's all muted like this. And no frets are coming through, no open strings are ringing out. And once you're able to do that, you can start looking at the actual strumming pattern that he plays at the beginning. I think the best way for a guitar player to learn something like this is to just sort of listen. And I'm going to play the strumming pattern for you slowly. And just take a look at what my right hand is doing. Notice how relaxed it is. And take note of where I'm emphasizing the beat, because that's a huge part of what makes this so soulful and funky at the beginning of the song. So this is what we got. And then we're into the song. But the magic comes when you combine that with what you're doing with your wah pedal, if you have one. So when I click on my wah pedal, what I'm actually doing is going back and forth from, completely all the way back and then all the way forward. And it's sort of following the main groove of the song. And the best way to learn, where you're emphasizing, the beats with your wah pedal is to listen to the song, and the parts that tonally sound brighter are the parts where the wah pedal is all the way forward, because that's what happens when you put your wah pedal all the way forward. And the parts that are tonally darker, that's where your wah pedal is all the way back. For example, you can hear with the wah pedal all the way forward, it's a lot brighter. And then when I roll it back, the tone gets darker. Yeah, that's the intro to the intro. All right, let's take a look at that opening lick. Sounds like this. So many amazing details to take note of here. The first is that very first note on the 9th fret. I just played it, sounds all right. But there are lots of details to add. First being vibrato. Really beautiful, aggressive vibrato that swells in. I'll show you what to do with the wah pedal in a moment, but beautiful vibrato. And then with your picking hand, you're not simply picking the string, but you're using an approach that you see a lot of, amazing funk-influenced blues players using. Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan used it as well, where you actually are muting the string below the string you're actually playing. And then when you attack with your picking hand, you can see that I'm just sort of like digging right in. And that allows me to actually keep my strumming hand really relaxed. Because instead of just picking the note, I'm coming at it like this. And because all the other strings around it are muted, especially the D string, it just adds a lot more body to the note. And that's a great technique to learn if you like Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan, players like that. Once you've played the first note, there's another little ghost strum where I'm doing an upstroke, and it's kind of muted. I'm letting it ring out for like a split second, and then muting it with my fretting hand. And then I come into this hammer-on, and when I play the 7th fret of the G string, there's a slight bend. First, let me try playing it with no little bend there, and then I'm going to play it with the little bend and just notice how much character it adds. That was no bend. Now with the bend. Beautiful. And again, this is a great technique that you see all over Jimi Hendrix's playing. And now your opening lick goes from this to something like this. Amazing. Now this is where things get really interesting. A lot of people typically end this opening phrase with, and that sounds nice, but there's a little more to it than that. The first being, when you play that 5th fret of the D string, again, slight bend on those notes. And this is super important. When you land on the 7th fret of the D string, lots of vibrato. Adds so much soul to the phrase. But hold on, there's more to it. The way Hendrix falls off of the phrase. There's this really subtle but essential kind of way he falls off, where after he plays that 7th fret of the D string, pull off to the 5th fret, pull off to the open string, and then you do the same sort of thing on the A string. And the more overdriven your tone is, the easier this probably is, because you have more sustain on the note, so then, you can just simply hammer on with your fretting hand without even using your picking hand. Which takes a bit of practice, but once you get it, the timing is da 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 da. And that's the opening lick. So now let's quickly talk about the wah pedal. You want to swell into that first note. That's the most important thing to take note of. And there's the first lick. Our next lick sounds like this. Again, we're approaching that 9th fret of the G string with a lot of vibrato and with that super cool muted sort of attack. Just adds so much more body to it. And then, when you get to that 7th fret of the G string, again, slight bend. And now, this is the fun part. Little pull off here. First thing you do, you approach that 9th fret of the G string with vibrato, and then you fall off the note to the 8th fret and then 7th fret. And again, essentially anytime you're approaching a note with that vibrato, there's probably going to be that extra spicy picking hand attack, where you're really just digging into the strings. So that's the next phrase. Let's add the wah pedal just to add that extra layer, and then we'll move on. You want to come into that 9th fret with vibrato, swell in with your wah. Sweet. All right, next phrase sounds like this. This is a fun line right here. You start with a really cool muted strum, just like in the intro of the intro. And then back into that 9th fret of the G string with vibrato, with that spicy picking hand attack. But there's this little upstroke after you play that note. And it just adds a little extra something there. It's pretty subtle, but it's kind of essential to the phrase. So once you do that, we come back into that familiar phrase. Make sure to bend on that 7th fret of the G. Bend on the 5th fret of the D string. When we land on that 7th fret of the D string, again, lots of vibrato. And then you pull off to the open D string. Add the wah pedal. And you're good to go. All right, we're almost halfway through the intro. Let's get that ending phrase. Sounds like this. Again, nothing new here, lots of vibrato on that 9th fret of the G string. And then, what's interesting about this next note is it's actually pretty much a ghost note where you almost can't make out any particular frets. But at the same time, when I listen to it, I almost hear the resonance of that note right there, you know, the 9th fret of the D string ringing out. So when I do that muted upstroke, ghost note sort of thing, I am covering that fret just to sort of have the resonance of that note ring out. And then this phrase ends with 7th fret to 9th fret with lots of vibrato. And I think the main magic comes from the wah pedal, which sounds like this. So again, swelling into those notes really brings the magic. Now before we move on to the second half of the intro, let's play everything we have so far slowly. I will be omitting the very first strumming part just because we already went over that, but starting from when you actually start fretting things, this is what it sounds like. So this is the next phrase. So what's going on here? It's very similar to what we've already looked at so far. However, when I listen to this phrase, I almost feel like he's coming into that first note with a really, really subtle hammer-on. Because if you play it without the hammer-on, it sounds like that. If you play it with this very subtle hammer-on, there's just a little extra something on the note. And I think that might be what it is. Feel free to disagree, but that's how I usually play it. And again, you come up with that muted upstrum. What changes here is how you fall off of that phrase. And it starts the same in the sense that you pull off from that 7th fret to the 5th fret to open. But when I listen to it, I almost feel like this A string's a bit different in the sense that hammer on to that 5th fret, then 7th fret, and then pull off. You could even pick it if you wanted to make sure that rings out. It's almost at times sounding like he does that. Other times when I listen, I'm not so sure. I go back and forth on it. So try both ways, see what you think. That being said, you could still end it the same way the first phrase is ended, and that would probably work just great too. So you do you, but this is what I think he does. Something like that. Now, one of my favorite phrases of the whole intro sounds like this. And what's happening here is, same as before, the second half of that phrase is a little different, because in the first half, there's that, chromatic pull-off. Instead, what we have here is a really interesting phrase where I sometimes wonder if he's not even picking the second time at all. But when I listen to it other times, I sort of hear a really, really subtle extra pick in there. When I play it, I try to make that as subtle as I can. And it's even more magical with the wah pedal, and we'll talk about that, in a minute. That's the next phrase. Let's move on to the next phrase. Again, it starts with muted strum. We end this phrase a little differently, because after we add that vibrato to the 7th fret D string, we end with a little hammer-on from the 5th fret to the 7th fret on the A string. Now the very last phrase of the intro sounds like this. So what's happening here? Coming in, that was wrong. Coming in to that 9th fret of the G string with that muted strum. When I just played it there, it was a little bit too muted. You still want the note to ring through. Pick it again, and now, when you go back down to the 7th fret of the G string, I would also approach it with that extra special spicy pick attack and add a little extra bend. You land on that 9th fret, and we play this phrase here. Bending at that 10th fret of the B string, you bend it up, then you release it, and then when you play that 9th fret of the G string, there's a nice slide down. And you really want to hear that bend coming down, because sometimes when I play it, I neglect to include that detail, and I listen later and I think, that kind of ruined the vibe a little bit. You want to hear that bend down. Just like that. Now let's add the wah pedal and talk about what to do there. So this is the phrase I said we'd come back to and talk about the wah pedal. This is what it sounds like. Because when I end this, I'm really swelling into it. So when you combine that with the vibrato and that really subtle ghost note that I think might be there, but maybe not, I don't know, it just sounds great. The very last phrase, take note of the wah pedal here. Going into that bend, there's a really slow sort of swell into it, and I definitely think it starts with the wah pedal all the way back in its darkest position. It just makes that sort of like crescendo into the, end of the phrase where you slide down. It's so cool. There we go. So now let me play that whole intro section for you slowly, and you can watch what I'm doing there and hopefully learn even further. Just internalize what I'm doing, and this is what it sounds like. Now, before we go today, I wanted to just add one more piece of information that might help a lot of people who are confused about the name of this song, because it confused me for a long time as well. The song that we were looking at today was Voodoo Child's Slight Return, but very frequently people refer to it as Voodoo Child. And the reason for that is because there is another track off of the same record, Electric Ladyland, that is called Voodoo Child, but it's a totally different song. It's a live jam between Hendrix and Steve Winwood and Jack Cassidy and Mitch Mitchell, and it's super cool, but a totally different piece of music. And then I think a lot of confusion arose, especially because Stevie Ray Vaughan covered the song so often, and for whatever reason, the live versions that he did of Voodoo Child's Slight Return were often named Voodoo Child. It's just confused a lot of people as a result, and I wanted to put that out there, just because I want you to know you're not alone in this confusion. It took me years to understand the difference, so here we go. So I hope this was a fun video for any Hendrix fans out there and you learned how to play this iconic intro. If you enjoyed it, you can like and subscribe if you want. Either way, we got more videos coming your way soon. And leave a comment down below if you know for sure how Voodoo Child is pronounced, because I read it as Chile or Chile because that's like the country. But at the same time, Voodoo Child would probably make more sense. So if you happen to know, leave a comment down below. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.